Hello, everybody, again. And welcome to our two new speakers. You introduced everybody, right? I'm sorry. I was outside dealing with just 6 problems.
I did that for Anita.
Okay, but we all know Anita already.
Yeah.
And Anita is here with us today because she is to blame that these two guys are actually in Croatia. So if you want to congratulate her later, that's what you need to do. I'm going to briefly start with a general question for both of you. How and why, how did you discover Croatia and why are you actually here today? What do you want to share with us? Just a little brief introduction.
Maybe Danny can start first because he discovered shooting in Croatia before I did.
Yeah.
Ironically, I discovered Croatia in Canada because Anita and I were part of a producers network called Transatlantic Partners, and we were in Halifax for 3 or 4 days meeting Canadian producers, and it was all about connecting Canadian producers with European producers. And I was there representing Hungary, and Anita was there representing Croatia, and the Eastern Europeans found each other in the bar.
Yeah, of course, where else?
And we were drinking a lot of martinis and became friends. And within basically a year, we already started putting together a co-production.
Great.
Well, I happened to be in that bar and I saw these two drinking martinis, so I joined them. Not quite.
And you said, I'm going to be the Canadian connection.
I'm going to be the Canadian connection. It wasn't quite like that. What happened is that I had shot a film with Danny in Hungary, and it was a really great experience. So when I was working for Universal again, we had to choose a film. We had to find locations for a film called River Wild. And we were looking for locations all over Europe. And Danny said we should really look at Croatia because I had a great experience there. And so he introduced me to Anita, and the rest is history.
So from the brief introduction, I'm going to hear your version, Anita. I'm going to conclude that the martini was the key.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Shaken or stirring?
I would just like to add, when we met Ogden in Croatia, when we shot River Wild 2, which will Ogden speak later more, then Rakija was connection.
Rakija, okay. So it's alcohol again. Maybe we should stop talking about that. Okay, so for both of you, what was your perception of Croatia before and after you actually did the first project?
Well, as a child, I came down here often to Slovenia and Croatia. It was Yugoslavia back then, so I always had and Hungarians like to come down to Croatia on holiday. So personally, I always loved Croatia, and filming here, we were always excited to come down here because of the beautiful locations. And so, the only question was that will everything happen on time, and will the budget be kept? But when I first met Anita, you could always sense she was quite serious and professional. So I don't think we ever had any worries, and it was just a question of getting through the actual intricacies of the shoot. Yeah. And it was always just problem solving. So, which is the same on any film, no matter where you go. So I had no preconceptions of Croatia, and definitely nothing negative, and I really have only more and more positive things to say about it the more we work down here. We've brought 3 films down here by now.
And you?
When Danny told me about his experience shooting here, I knew we would be in great hands with Anita and her crew. And it was absolutely the truth. I just absolutely loved working with the Croatians. They're very, very hardworking, very professional. And I compared them to our shoot in Slovakia, which was not at all what we expected. But Croatia was a breath of fresh air when we came here. It was wonderful.
Great. Well, that's a brief introduction to actually trying to see what these kind of partnerships can do in the future. And Anita, maybe you want to say a couple of words before I give the table to Danny for his presentation of what happened in Hungary, and hopefully we can say that in 10 years for Croatia.
Well, I really wanted that Danny and Ogden come here because we have a great example in our neighborhood, Hungary, what is happening in last 5 years there. And it's great comparison, I think, with Croatia because it's really booming, everything what is happening. Danny will tell more that all studios are booked for the next 2 years. And big American productions that are coming there, but not just big American productions for production services, it's also happening grow of domestic production. And Ogden's experience is really great because Ogden is a great producer for Universal Studio, but beside that, Ogden is also independent producer who is having high experience in production of independent films in Canada, especially in British Columbia. So Ogden will speak more about that. So that's just a short introduction why I wanted that they two of them come here and speak about their experience.
So please, let us hear what happened in Hungary, and can you copy-paste some of that to us? We're halfway there, but we just need the other half.
Do you have the slideshow? There we go. And can we turn off the bright lights? Okay, so when we've been coming down here a lot, and often we've heard that some in the local industry are afraid that if the production service industry takes off, then local industry will suffer, which from our experience in Hungary sounds crazy to me, but I thought we would just go through what's happened in Hungary since 2004 when Hungary passed its film law and first introduced a 20% rebate, and then it's really taken off to the point where Hungary now is the biggest filmmaking hub in all of Europe. So this is just about me. I started at a company called Corda Studios, which is a big film studio. It opened in 2007. Pretty much it was inspired by that film law that was passed in 2004, and some wealthy investors in Hungary saw the potential for the film industry, and they built a big studio. I started there as an assistant, just translating for people, and I became the head of production by the time I left. And we started actually moving outside the studio and bringing in projects that didn't even film in the studio, and that's when we brought in the TV series Ransom season 2, which was quite a big deal for us as a company. And then we set up our own company with my partner, who was also at Corda Studios. That's where I met him, Jonathan Halperin, and we set up Hero Squared. And these are the films we've done in the last 4 years. So it's really been a lot. We're on, I think, we're prepping the 12th film. So we work a lot for Universal Studios. We've done 2 films with Ogden, 2 other films for Universal. We just did an Apple TV Plus show, which was a big honor for us, working with Errol Morris, the Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker. We've done movies from $2 to $45 million, so that's been about the range. They've all been based in Hungary, but we've come down to Croatia with 3 of these films, and one of those films also went up to Slovakia, so we've been working in the region as well. This is about Ogden, who needs no introduction. Pictured here, hunting bears in Canada at a lake. It's been great. Honestly, it's been very great working with Ogden. He's one of the best producers we work with. He has a lot of experience in Canada, and he's become a permanent establishment here in Eastern Europe too. So hopefully we'll be making more with him. We are planning to make the next one next year, also in Hungary. So just in general about the Hungarian film industry. So it introduced its rebate system in 2004. It was 20% back at the time. Then it got increased to 25%, I believe, in 2010, and to 30% in 2017. We got the data of the last 10 years of filmmaking in Hungary, which even shocked me, the volume of it. We got this from the National Film Office, so this is all public data. Over 3,000 films have been made. which is 1.4 trillion Hungarian forints, that's 3.5 billion euros spent in Hungary, and direct and indirect support given to those films. So this is the film rebate, and also the funding of local films is around 1 billion euros. And just last year, 550 million euros of films were made in Hungary. It's by far the biggest filmmaking hub in the EU. I just heard a few weeks ago that of ARI, for example, based in Munich and with centers all around Europe, 60% of their profits is coming out the Budapest office. That's how big Budapest has become over the last few years. So it really is after London, the biggest filmmaking hub in Europe, and because of Brexit, it's now the biggest in the EU. So what is the Hungarian rebate? When it's advertised as 30%, which sounds great, but it actually has a lot of things that make it quite robust. So first of all, it's reliable. It's been around since 2004, and the worst thing a government could do is have a rebate and then decide they don't want it, and then have another government come in and they say, okay, we want it again, and then run out of money, and that doesn't work. Like a company like Universal Studios doesn't want to hear that. The reason we've made 4 movies in a row for Universal is because they were taking all these movies to Romania, but then Romania had some change of government, and some government minister didn't like that law, and they put it on hold for review, and Universal Studios didn't get back some rebate. So they said, okay, we're done with Romania, and they just moved all that production over to us in Hungary, which is great for us. So the reliability is probably the most important thing. What's also great is that it's uncapped. Every rebate in the region, in Slovakia, in Prague, and here in Croatia too, there's a certain amount of money, and that when that runs out, the industry can't grow anymore. And Hungary's has always been uncapped because it was funded by a mechanism where profitable companies reduced their own taxes by paying into the system. So everybody was motivated to keep the system running. And because of these two, it's become bankable. You can get loans against it. So there are Hungarian banks, but ironically, it's even easier to get loans against it with French banks, UK, and US entities. So there's French bank POSLJEDNIH is often funding the Hungarian rebate, loaning against it. US banks and UK entities like Ashland Hill and Headgear and other companies. And finally, what's also great is that beyond the 30%, you get little extra rebates here and there. So when foreigners come to Hungary, because of the double taxation treaties Hungary has with various countries, but most importantly, the important ones, Canada, UK, and the EU, they will pay their taxes in Hungary. So for the work in their Hungary, they will pay 15% withholding tax in Hungary. And as a result of that, sort of a quirk in the law, they become qualified as Hungarian spend, and you will also get some rebate on them. You actually net about 18% rebate on, let's say, your Brad Pitt in Hungary who pays his taxes in Hungary. And then there's also some foreign spend that you can spend outside of Hungary. This was actually, the EU asked Hungary to do this so that it wouldn't just be protecting its own industry, but would allow films to spend money outside of Hungary. And they also made that part of the qualifying spend. So if a film is in Hungary and is, let's say, spending $100 or 100 euros in Hungary, it can spend another 25 euros outside of Hungary and also make that qualifying. So as a result of that, it's actually, you're netting about 37.5% on your Hungarian spend, which is up there with some of the best rebates in the world. As a result of all this, 6 film studios have been built. There's 35 stages. So after Korda Studios, where I worked, opened, Origo Studios opened, an even bigger studio, and that's actually in Budapest, so it's even better. Some smaller studios opened. The government is now even building 4 more stages. So we're up to 35 stages, and they're still all fully booked until middle of next year because there's just so much production. And then there's ARI Rental, of course, and probably the biggest equipment company in the world that nobody's heard of, MBS. They're American-owned, and they're just buying up everything. They just invested heavily into Budapest as well. And the plan is for Budapest to become become the hub for all of the region, and hopefully they will come down here to Croatia at one point as well. What's very important is that it's not only is there a great rebate in Hungary, the government has also taken steps to ensure that the Hungarian crew is not too expensive. So there's no fringes on crew, mostly because to date they've all been invoicing, so they've been like subcontractors. But now just recently, since September, they've also introduced like a lower tax rate for them. So basically about 15 to 20% is what they pay in tax on their work, which is a reasonable tax, and I think anybody anywhere in the world, in the civilized world, is happy to pay to make their money legally. It really is, you know, there was a lot of black and gray work in the film industry in Hungary in the 90s and early 2000s. I'm sure it was the same here and every other post-communist country. It's really whitened and made clean, all the film industry. Everybody just works legally now and pays their taxes. And also very important is training down here. I don't know if you can see that, but 0.5% of all the qualifying budgets of any production that's accessing this rebate system is put back into training. So there's a lot of training. So now we're training, right now in Budapest, there's transport coordinator training, which surprised me. There's first AD training, and there's accountant, film accountant trainings, which are all great because people take 9-month courses and then they're ready to get into the film industry and actually do specific jobs and not just, you know, not just pretend to be directors or want to be directors, which there's always plenty of in every country. But they don't really help build the industry from the bottom up. So the positive effects of all this is amazing infrastructure gets built organically. Hungary has not had to invest into the film studios that have been built. Like the market has done most of that. Rental companies come as a result. So like I mentioned, the business is so huge, every rental company in Europe wants to be there now. Transport gets built up, not only flights, but local transport. You know, there's a lot of transport companies, just a lot of cars going around. Hotels are always needed for film production. And tourism, as a result, comes up as well, because I always say there is no better advertisement for Hungary than when Matt Damon says, "I love being in Budapest." That's probably worth more than 10 years of the Hungarian Tourist Board's budget. And Budapest has become an extremely popular tourist destination. When I started working in the film industry in 2006, 2007, we would go to Los Angeles and they would ask us, "Is Budapest safe?" Or they would mix it up with Bucharest, which is the biggest insult you can tell a Hungarian. But now it's not even a question. They're like, they've either been there or they can't wait to go there. So, I mean, Budapest has really taken off. And I think a large part of that is the film industry, because so many influencers, so many important people have come there, they go back, they tell their friends, they post about it, and it's just really taken off. There's a great study that actually the HAVC here in Croatia commissioned from Olsberg SPI, and they asked this big company to analyze what the economic effects are on a country of a film rebate system. And these are the numbers they came up with. Every government that has a rebate has had similar studies done. And the numbers are always a little different, you know, whether it's 11x or 8x or 3x or 2x, it doesn't really matter. I think the point is that the money that the government invests into a film industry always comes back many times more. And it's not just because everybody likes film. There's only so much you can like something and pay millions and millions of euros for it, except for soccer in Hungary, which the Hungarian government will, or football as we call it, the Hungarian government will pay unlimited amounts of money for. But it's a business decision, as long as it's done for the long term, and it comes back in VAT, it comes back in increased industry, and it comes back in tourism. And as far as the film industry is concerned, which is the whole point, and this trickles down into the local industry, is the know-how that comes over from the international film industry. I mean, there's just filmmaking best practices. When let's say 10 years ago, nobody in the Hungarian film industry did budgets in Movie Magic. It was all Excels. Now everybody works in Movie Magic because that's just the international film standard. and everybody working in the local industry is also working in the international industry. It's not really delineated anymore. People move back and forth between the two. People who maybe don't like speaking English so much or don't speak English as well will prefer to work on local productions, but almost everybody works on both. So there's a lot of know-how transfer, and all the filmmaking practices that are accepted internationally, and I think we can agree they work well, because why else would the whole world be using them? They very organically transfer into the local industry. A lot of actors, a lot of local actors end up getting work in international films. Budapest has, let's say, 10 to 20 international actors that just live there and they show up in every movie that's made there. But a lot of Hungarian actors as well have been popping up in roles. So if you watch, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which is a great movie, some very key roles were done by some, for us, very famous Hungarian actors. Probably the viewer in England has no idea, but their names get out there, and it gives them a platform to take off from. Cutting edge technology also starts coming in. So you'll have local people in Croatia, in Hungary, using technology which probably no local production would ever be able to afford, or even get a ARRI to bring in and show off. But because they can rent it out to a Dune and these mega productions, you can pretty much get everything in Budapest now that you could get in Munich or London or anywhere else. And the locals learn how to use it, and then they can also transfer that knowledge to their own production industry. Obviously, world-renowned talent and experience comes with all these films. So, you have big names come in. Luckily for us in Hungary, Denis Villeneuve, who I think is one of the best directors in the world, he's fallen in love with Budapest. He's made Blade Runner there, Dune 1, now he's doing Dune 2. So he's bringing the mega productions. But, a lot of actors and directors, they just like being in Budapest. They've had great experiences, they like the crew, and they keep coming back. The equipment rental, I've already mentioned, so I'm not going to mention it again. Very important is international film finance. Here in Croatia, you have a good rebate, but I can't get a loan against it, so it's not that useful. But over the last 20 years in Hungary, we can get the rebate financed, and like I mentioned, not even through Hungarian banks, but international banks. Same with the VAT. That's VAT in Hungary is ridiculously high. It's 27%, it's probably the highest in the world, and it would be a big problem were we not able to get bank loans against it. But because it works well and everybody gets their money back in a timely fashion, often the bank giving the rebate loan and the pre-sale loan is happy to give the VAT financing as well, because they see it as a safe loan, and it really makes putting together the distribution and the financing package make sense. And accounting best practices, I think that's very important, because any major production going into a new country, their biggest worry is how things are accounted for, how the cost report's going to look. Are we going to know how our money was spent, and are we going to know it in a timely fashion? And they will send a financial controller into that country to oversee the accounting department, and the accounting department in the local country will learn from that financial controller how to do these very complicated film production accountings. I mean, that's something that I think Hungary has, even in the last 5 years, we've made a lot of big improvements on, and it's probably the most important factor in making an international production feel secure in that country. And the film law was passed in 2004, but these are just all the local successes, so nothing to do with international filmmaking or international productions, but local talent or local films. Son of Saul, I'm sure everybody's heard of. It did the sweep of Cannes, Golden Globes, and Oscars, so that's probably the most successful Hungarian movie ever. Ironically, the Film Institute didn't even want to give it money, but because the company that was producing it also had a production service business, they had some money and they put in extra money, and that's how that movie got made. It was actually a very low budget film and amazing success, amazing movie. On Body and Soul, also it won in Berlin, it was shortlisted for the Foreign Language Oscar. Dune, which is a huge mega production, but a Hungarian got Best Art Direction Oscar for it because Hungary's gotten to the point where they're not bringing in all the foreigners now to run every department, but Hungarians are now being put into those positions. And you can ask Ogden, the first question he asked me is our Hungarian first AD available? Is our Hungarian production designer available? Because they know they're just as good as anybody they bring in, if not better, because they're local and they know the local business. And they've had experiences with them. They've done a great job, and this is more and more in every production, and especially in our productions, because we do lower budgeted stuff. The producers now are asking us to deliver locals, and it's only if we can't get a local because they're too busy that we bring in foreigners now. So it's really turned around. It was exactly the opposite 10 years ago, which is, I think, the main thing any film industry wants to achieve is that their local talent is getting put onto an international stage, which is bigger than just their little local language movies. There were 2 shorts too, that one, and also 4 technical Oscars since 2004, which I didn't list here, but those were quite big deals. There was a lot of technology that came out from Hungarians and from Hungary, and now they're used in the film industry. And here is, here is just to nod it all off. Here's a picture of our crew on the Croatian-Bosnian border this summer. This was River Wild, which all the 3 of us all worked on together. This was a great shoot. We had a great time down there. An amazing river, the Una River. I would have never gone down there had it not been for this film. I even took the family down there. And that's what's great about what we do. We often go to parts of the world where you wouldn't usually go on vacation and see amazing things and amazing sights. And it's going to be a great movie, The River Wild. So I hope you can all see it next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have time or do we have to break?
No, we have time because
Okay.
I mean, at least
I won't be long.
5 minutes, yeah.
I won't be long. 5 minutes?
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I think is very important is that the local film community supports any changes to the tax credit. And as Danny just illustrated, the increased tax credit in Hungary did not hurt the local film industry. It actually now helped them, and I think they have some of the biggest budgets that they ever had because the whole industry was sort of lifted. And what I'd like to just add is my experience is not so much in Europe like Danny's. I started about 40 years ago. I started in British Columbia, Canada. And that was when the tax credits were just sort of starting up. And there was a huge resistance to these tax credits from the local community, and I was part of that. Because we all thought exactly what maybe some of you think, that the film industry in Croatia, in British Columbia at that time, would be swamped by foreigners, and then we wouldn't be able to get our own films up and running. But I have to say, because I've worked with most of the big studios, American big studios in British Columbia and now in Quebec and Europe and around the world, that that's not been my experience. And I have, because when you work on those bigger productions, you get paid very well. I was able to develop some of my local independent projects. And you know, one of the latest ones, in fact, is because the Hungarian tax credit caused me to come to Hungary. And Danny and I are doing an independent film where it'll be a Hungarian-Canadian co-production that we shoot in Scotland. And those are the wonderful opportunities for any of you producers, directors, and other film professionals who are here that you will get if your tax credit is competitive. Right now, unfortunately, because of the fringes and the level of the tax credit, Hungary beats you out. Greece will now beat you out with its 40% tax credit. And then even places like Quebec and British Columbia will beat you out. And it's hard for me as a producer to say I'm going to come to Croatia because it just doesn't make sense. Universal or any studio that I'm working with will look at the comparisons of the budget in Croatia and somewhere else, and they'll say, Ogden, why do you want to shoot in Croatia? I can say I love it here, which I do, and Zagreb is much nicer than Budapest, by the way. I love Zagreb. But I think as a film community, if you're going out there, you have to, I think you should really support an increased tax credit, because it will also help the independent filmmakers in Zagreb and Croatia. In British Columbia, from the time the tax credit started, and British Columbia has a population just a bit bigger than Croatia's. It's about 5 million. It's a $5 billion a year industry in British Columbia. And the local filmmakers are making more series. The directors are directing even American series that come. So it's not like directors aren't going to get their work. The producers are producing it. I'm a Canadian producer who works internationally, and I think my career was sort of really helped by the fact that these tax credits exist. In Quebec, where I now live, I live in Montreal, they introduced a tax, they were a little late to the game, and their film industry, though, is about $2.8 billion too. So what you have is you have these real success stories. And I think if you go out there, think about it, if you're thinking about protecting your industry, and I would say the best way to protect your industry is to increase your tax credit so it's competitive, so that Danny and I and Anita, when she's producing, we can say, okay, this is the best place to shoot. It's not just the locations. I think the locations, especially on the sea, are spectacular, but you want people shooting in Zagreb. And I think if you do increase the tax credit, I guarantee that there will be studios that will be built. Your crew base will be multiplied. British Columbia has 65,000 people who are employed, just that one province alone in the film industry. And then so many others in hospitality and transport and restaurants, all that stuff on top of that. So it is one of those things. It's a win-win situation. And if you have any fears that an increased tax credit will somehow damage the local film industry, I don't think you have a reason to fear that. So I would go out, talk to your colleagues, talk to the people in the government, encourage them to increase the tax credit. I think that there has been some discussion right now. And that's all I have to say. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for coming, and I hope Anita is going to bring more of your co-productions and new projects here. And hopefully next time, maybe in a year or two, we'll have some other things to talk about, like a potential studio being built, as we've been talking for a couple of years now. And we are all pushing for all these things that you talked about. And I am sure that certain things will increase and change to be better. I think we're doing a great job at this point, but everything can always be a little better, as we know from everything in our lives. So thank you very much. Go have some lunch, and we'll continue in, at this point, half an hour. So eat fast.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.